Recognized.
So for the witnesses, thank you. Just real quick on the CERCLA question, I know it's an important one. And I have a bunch of questions on some other topics, but is it safe to say that all three of you agree that there should be some element of limitation on liability, particularly on the PFAS CERCLA-related issue? Was that your testimony, Ms. Beiser?
Senator, I think it's a good conversation to have to look at any unintended consequences. We want to make sure that polluters are on the hook to pay and that we're not overburdening ratepayers, for example. So I think it's a topic that's worthy of careful consideration.
Okay. How about you, Ms. Powell?
I do think it's important for water utilities as passive receivers to have those protections, and that the focus be on the polluters bearing the costs.
It's like airports and other entities too that all of a sudden are seeing like they might, I mean, in my state, a lot of these entities will go bankrupt and they weren't the reason for it. But what about you, Mr. Volk? You have a view on that?
Yeah, the small and rural systems would totally agree. They should not be held responsible for that, and the polluters should pay.
Okay, good. Ms. Powell, and this is really for everybody, this administration talks a lot about environmental justice, environmental equity. I saw that in your bio. I have no issue with that. The problem, and I've said it in this committee a million times before, the Biden administration has environmental justice and equity with a big asterisk. If you're an Alaska Native or indigenous person from Alaska, you don't get any environmental justice or equity. You get attacked by this administration. So yesterday, we had another outrage, illegal outrage. The administration canceled leases in ANWR despite Congress saying you had to do it. And then they restricted the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, which was set aside by Congress like 70 years ago for oil and gas development. But, Mr. Chairman, I want to submit the joint Alaska delegation press release on this for the record.
Without objection.
The vast majority of the people in this press release are Alaska Natives, elected Alaska Natives, screaming. What are you doing, Deb Haaland? Why are you taking away our jobs? Why are you taking our revenues? This is environmental injustice for indigenous people in my state. It happens every damn day with this administration. I've said it 50 million times in this committee. But why do they get so outraged? I want to show this chart. I've also shown it a million times in this committee. That's the American Medical Association chart from 1980 to 2014. What places in America had life expectancy increases? And unfortunately, some places in America actually had life expectancy decreases, mostly because of the opioid epidemic. The place in our country that increased life expectancy the most by far was Alaska, up to 13 years. And it was in our rural communities, our indigenous communities. Why? A, because it started really low. Life expectancy for Native Alaskans was the lowest in the country by far. But B, from 1980 on, we had responsible resource development, jobs, clinics, hospitals, very importantly this panel, water and sewer. So my constituents' life expectancy in a lot of these places, North Slope, Lucian Island Chain, Northwest Arcborough, up to 13 years. 13 years. Like, what's more important, I've asked this many times, policy indicator of success more important than are the people you representing living longer? I don't know. I don't think there's anything more important. So yesterday, this administration took a whack at that. They're trying to make my constituents live less longer. Deb Haaland, ironically, it's just shocking. She's a Native American. She attacks Alaska Natives every time she opens her mouth. But anyways, what does that have to do with this hearing? Because a lot of the revenues that come from this kind of resource development go into water and sewer. Now, my state has over 30 communities that don't have any running water or flush toilets. I think that's the most of any state in the country. It's all indigenous people. So, do you think that's environmental justice or racial equity? When by the way, they're the most patriotic Americans in the country because they all serve at higher rates in the military, Alaska Natives, than any other ethnic group. So my question for the panel is, in terms of formulas, and by the way, the EPA administrator was in Alaska Just over August, we did a meeting with Alaska Natives on these issues. I showed them that chart. I've shown them that chart many times. So in terms of the formula for water and sewer, don't you think it should prioritize, just for fairness, call it racial justice, racial equity, just call it good old American fairness, the communities that don't have anything first? Like, there's a lot of talk about aging infrastructure on water and sewer, but I think sometimes we miss, like, no infrastructure. So can I get the witness's response to that? Just on a formula, shouldn't we be prioritizing communities in America that don't have anything? Flush, no running water, no flush toilets. American citizens. It's not right, in my view. But I'd welcome any views on that. Ms. Powell, maybe you can start.
I'll be happy to start, Senator Sullivan, and thank you for the question and the awareness. I will say from a personal standpoint, and I've said it many times, I believe that equity is about communities having what they need so that all communities can thrive on equal footing. And
like running water.
Having been in the water sector for some time, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the water sector, but I can tell you I don't know anyone that believes that we should trade the needs of the unserved or underserved for the needs of the unserved. I think every community needs to have what it needs, and I think that this historic investment in water and wastewater infrastructure, or being able to provide wastewater infrastructure, needs to be fully funded. It needs to be sustainable and long-term so that every community can thrive on equal footing.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So we share your concern with making sure that we're getting funding to those who need it the most. And so we actually change a lot of our processes to ensure that we are reaching. We have a lot of communities who are bypassed over the years for water and wastewater services. So we, in getting our funding, canvassed all the county public health departments to find out which communities did not have service or did not have access to reliable service. And then we did outreach to utilities to encourage them to do projects to connect those folks. And so far, we've connected over 2,000 homes, or we were slated to connect over 2,000 homes to public water for the first time. And we're still working on that. So it did require us changing our process. And also, we do give, extra points on our criteria to make sure that we are meeting those needs of our residents in all parts of the state, especially our rural parts of our state.
Great. Mr. Volk, you have a final thought on this?
Yeah, in North Dakota, we've worked hard with various state partners, federal partners, to meet the gap of those underserved. Not only we do have 4 tribal nations to meet those needs. There are other places in the state where, just like you described, where there is limited water, limited sewage. Even this day and age, it's crazy. And yes, those should go close to the top.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you. Senator, glad you could join us.